There we go. Welcome to the second annual State of Pre-K Community Roundtable. Before I get started, I did want you to know that everybody's aware it's a little hot in here. We're on a university campus, which means there's things that happen like air conditioning gets turned off and you can't turn it back on. But the windows are open and the sun is dropping, so I think we'll all feel really comfortable pretty soon. Our theme this year for our community roundtable is educating young dual language learners with a focus on Columbus and Ohio. As the second annual community roundtable, what we do is focus on a topic related to pre-kindergarten that is timely and important, hence the focus on young dual language learners. You'll learn a lot more about who young dual language learners are and why it's so important for us to have community conversations about these youngsters. I'm Laura Justice. I serve as the Executive Director of the Crane Center for Early Childhood Research and Policy here at Ohio State. Before we begin, an event like this, it may look like it's easy to pull off, but they never are. And so I'd like to thank a few people who have really been instrumental in getting us all here today. Melanie Tracy is here today somewhere, and she has been helping really on the ground to coordinate this event, and she's worked very closely with the Office of Advancement in the College of Education and Human Ecology. So thanks to these folks for really doing a lot of the boots on the ground work to organize. I'd also like to say thank you to Rhonda Johnson and the Mayor's Office, Department of Education. We've worked together the last few years to think about what are the education-related topics that we need to be talking about within our community. And lastly, I'd like to very sincerely thank the Crane family for their ongoing and very consistent support of the Crane Center. There is a relationship there between the name of the center and the name of the family, and it represents their dedicated and ongoing support of the work that we do. My job today is to welcome you and let you know how very happy we are that you have all come to the campus today. This is a community roundtable, which means we need to have people like you from our community be here to have this conversation. Today we'll give you the opportunity to have an important and timely conversation with education leaders, policymakers, practitioners, and key community members about how we can work together to promote the well-being of young dual language learners in our city, in our state. Yesterday I was astonished. There's a new report that came out about Latinos in the United States, and this report shared that in 2060, Latinos will be 1 in 3. 33% of our population will be Latino. Now that doesn't mean that they will all be Spanish speakers or bilingual, but I assume many of the Latinos in our culture in 20, 35 years are children who are dual language learners in our schools today. So if that is our future, we need to ensure that we are working for it in a positive and proactive way. Before I turn over the mic, I do want to invite you to a sister event that we have tomorrow here, 12 to 5, similar focus, dual language learners, but it will be more research focused. But we absolutely would love to see every one of you here tomorrow, and we do have information out at the table about that. Now I'd like to turn the mic over to Tanny Crane. If you don't know Tanny, she's the president and CEO of the Crane Group, which is a prominent family-run, third generation, family-run business here in Columbus, Ohio. And in her spare time, when she's not the CEO and president, she's one of our community's, probably our community's most stalwart supporter of early education and its importance here in our city and state. Some of the important leadership roles that she currently plays include serving as the chair of the Columbus Early Childhood Education Council, which is part of the newly formed Future Ready Columbus. And she also serves as the president of the board of I Know I Can, which I think is a fascinating endeavor to promote college access for students in Columbus City schools. So please help me to welcome Tanny Crane.
Good afternoon. Okay, come on. Okay, this has been a great day. I have been introduced twice today as the CEO of Crane Group, but more importantly as an advocate for early learning, and I'm just glad no one from my company is here because I wonder what I might be doing otherwise. But it's really a great day. It's a bookend day that is ending in such an upbeat manner with all of you and really learning about bilingualism. But it started out great because I had the wonderful opportunity to participate in a press conference with Council President Andy Ginther and Rhonda Johnson and Dan Good, our Superintendent of Schools, to talk about not only the value of early learning, but the necessity of early learning and the opportunity for universal pre-K. So it was really a wonderful opportunity to showcase one at an early learning facility in the Hilltop and to be around our young learners, but to really promote what's important to all of us, not only in this room, but in our community. So what a great way to start the day and a great way to end the day. So thank you, President Ginther, for doing that. And thank you all for participating in this community roundtable. I don't have to tell you the value of being here. You're all early learning advocates, and thank you so much for being here. As you know, this event is sponsored by the Crane Center for Early Childhood Research and Policy in the College of Education and Human Ecology. That is a mouthful that I didn't even look at my notes on that one. But I also have to just stop and thank Laura Justice. She has been such an avid leader in early learning for our community, stalwart, not just supporter, but leader in research, in really making us focus on what the research says. So we are immersed in data, and then through the Schoenbaum Center, they practice it, and then our opportunity is to set that in policy so that we spread that word. So thank you to Laura for your leadership in our community, and she's never going to go anywhere. So our purpose today in this roundtable is to start conversations. And today's is around regarding and understanding and fostering the language and literacy development of young bilingual children. Now, I've been practicing this word, bilingualism. But, I've learned so much in just reading up a bit about it. It is prevalent throughout the world as children routinely learn 2 or more languages in their homes. Children who are dual language learners acquire 2 or more languages simultaneously and learn a second language while continuing to develop their first language. I do wish that happened in my home. It didn't. It is estimated, and Laura talked to this, that 1 in 3 people are bilingual or multilingual in the U.S. The number of young bilinguals in pre-K through 12 settings and immigrant destinations is rapidly increasing. In the past 25 years, this population has more than doubled and is growing faster than that of the English-speaking population. The U.S. Census Bureau projects that within the next 15 years, children growing up with 2 languages will constitute 40% of the school-age population. And I know a piece of data that I've always had rummaging around that I think in Columbus City schools, and Ron, did you know, over 100 languages you're hearing in the hallways. That is astounding. With a solid understanding of how language develops for young bilinguals, all of us, as families, as educational professionals, and policymakers can nurture and encourage bilingualism as a valued individual and societal asset. At today's roundtable, we have brought together, as Laura said, key stakeholders with an interest in this topic and expertise, including the educational advocacy, policy, and business community. I invite you to participate in future activities and events, and as Laura said, tomorrow we will have a symposium. Now I am pleased to introduce Millie Gort, who is an associate professor here at The Ohio State University of Teaching and Learning, who specializes in bilingual education. I just had the opportunity to sit next to Millie and learn just fascinating aspects of her childhood and growing up. Millie has studied bilingualism both as a teacher of 3rd grade bilingual education and as a university researcher. Her special interest is in the understanding of the nature of emerging bilingualism and biliteracy in early childhood, and very importantly, preparing teachers to support children as they develop bilingual proficiency. Millie has worked both locally here in Columbus in the Spanish Immersion Academy and nationally as the U.S. advisor to Sesame Street Workshop, the nonprofit educational arm of Sesame Street, which is also fascinating. Most recently, she secured a 3-year federal grant to study writing instruction for 4th grade Latino and Latina students with varying Spanish-English language profiles. Her goal is to develop professional training for teachers and educators to teach writing more effectively to young Spanish-speaking English language learners. Millie has a special understanding of bilingual education because she was born in Cuba and grew up in South Florida. She experienced firsthand what it means to be immersed in both English and Spanish at home and in school. Please join me in welcoming Millie Gort.
Ooh, that was a lot. Thank you so much, Tanny. That was really nice. You have a really good memory from our brief conversation. So my job is to provide a little bit of context, and actually Tanny did a great job of giving you some definitions. I'm going to build on some of those definitions, but to provide a little bit of context about who dual language learners are, to provide a picture nationally of what the population figures look like, and then also to then hone in a little bit on the local context. So you can get a sense of the prevalence of this quickly growing population. So, all right, so somebody's got the slides. I don't have to deal with, oh, you, okay. I don't have to press any buttons, perfect. So as Tanny mentioned, a common definition that's used, and this is a definition that is one that the Office of Head Start uses, but a lot of other professional organizations have also adopted. In terms of thinking about who dual language learners are children who are learning 2 or more languages at the same time, or children who are learning a second language after the first language has been established and while continuing to develop their home language. So that gives you an idea of how broad this population is. This label that we are going to be using throughout the next couple of days, dual language learners, actually is one that encompasses other labels and terms that you may have heard of and are familiar with. So it's quite a broad term. It encompasses other frequently used terms like limited English proficient, which is still in the federal legislation, bilingual, which Tanny used several times, English language learners, another term that maybe you're familiar with that the federal government and the state government uses to describe part of this population. English learners is a variation on that, and also another term that you may have heard is children who speak a language other than English, or LOTE, L-O-T-E. Another way to think about this population is really well put in this quote that I pulled from National Clearinghouse of English Language Acquisition at the U.S. Department of Education. It gives us a sense not only of who we're talking about, who we're referring to when we talk about dual language learners, but also the prevalence of this population in the context of U.S. schools. So I'll read it. One of the largest demographic shifts over the last 10 years is the sharp increase in the number of students in public schools who speak English as their second language. The majority of these children are born in the United States and thus from a very young age are acquiring both the language of their family as well as the language of the larger community, in our case being English. These very young children are dual language learners. Part of this quote is something that a lot of people are surprised by, and that's the fact that most dual language learners are actually born in the United States. Usually people have a picture of dual language learners as immigrants themselves. They may come from families where immigration plays a role, and there's been an immigration history, but the children we're talking about, the majority of them are actually born in the United States. So that's important to know. So now that we have an idea of who we're talking about, I want to paint a picture of how many young dual language learners there are, and I'll start by talking with some national figures. One of the challenges in trying to figure out numbers is that we actually have no good numbers. There's no precise estimates of the size of the population. Part of the issue is that they're so young and it's hard to actually measure their language proficiency. It's hard to get an idea of what languages are being used at home. Sometimes families underreport languages other than English used at home because of fear that their children are going to perhaps be treated differently. And so we don't have really, really good figures, but we do know that the number and the proportion of young dual language learners is fastly rising. So this table here gives you an idea of preschoolers, about 3 and 4-year-olds across the country, and where we're capturing some of these numbers. And so those children, for example, that are participating in Head Start and Early Head Start programs nationally, there's about 315,967. Approximately 30% of those are young dual language learners. So that's a hefty population being served by Head Start and Early Head Start. In state-funded preschool, we see also some good numbers. Of the 38 states that have state-funded pre-K, 24 disaggregate pre-K data for young dual language learners, so we have a sense of some numbers there. In some district-funded preschools across the nation, again, the Office of Civil Rights, that's OCR, estimates over 117,000 or 11.4% of children are being served that are young dual language learners. And then unfortunately, another large chunk of the population of dual language learners are being served in proprietary care centers, or they're being cared for exclusively in the home, and we have no data on those children. And so you can see how the numbers are rising, the numbers are significant, but we don't have a complete picture. Now we turn to Ohio stats, and just to situate some of these numbers for our local population. The last census counted the population under age 6 at just over 866,000 in the state. Approximately 2% of those are limited English proficient. I want to say something about that term because that's a narrower part of the population of dual language learner, because there's an actual definition there's criteria that are used to meet that definition of limited English proficient, which is just one subset of dual language learners. So the federal definition that I want to share with you, and forgive me as I go through several of these criteria, the way that the feds define limited English proficient includes children or people who are aged 3 through 21, so that's the first criteria, who are enrolled or preparing to enroll in an elementary school or secondary school, who were not born in the United States or whose native language is a language other than English, and who come from an environment where a language other than English is dominant, or those who are Native American or Alaska Native, or a native resident of outlying areas, and who come from an environment where a language other than English is used, and has had a significant impact on the individual's level of English language proficiency, or those who are migratory, whose native language is a language other than English, and who come from an environment where a language other than English is dominant, and finally, whose difficulties speaking, reading, writing, or understanding the English language may be sufficient to deny the individual the ability to meet the state's proficient level of achievement on state assessments, the ability to achieve successfully in classrooms where the language of instruction is English, or the opportunity to participate fully in society. So what that tells us is that this 2% of the population that are being sort of signaled as limited English proficient doesn't really give us the whole picture in the state of Ohio of children who are growing up with 2 languages, either in the context of school or in a combination of their home communities, their homes, and their school experiences. So that is a grossly, I think, an undercount. To give you another way of thinking about the diversity of languages that children are growing up around in Ohio, Ohio has 110 different home languages represented at last count. There might be more now. And the top 10 language groups are listed up here. As you can see, Spanish is the next highest group after English speakers, obviously. In Ohio, Somali happens to be the second largest after English language group. And then there's others there that you can see are very diverse. Interestingly enough, Pennsylvania Dutch is it's a dialect of German that's spoken by the Amish in the state of Ohio. And it's often it's an interesting group because they're not necessarily an immigrant group, right? They've been here for many, many, many years. But they certainly are raising children around with Pennsylvania Dutch and also English. And as we get closer and we think now of getting closer to the Columbus area, one of the things that's important to know about Ohio is that it's considered a new immigrant settlement area. What that means is that it's a new region of the U.S. that didn't previously have high populations of immigrants. Some figures that I want to share with you, and I don't want to bog you down with lots of figures, but according to the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, over 13,000, actually closer to 14,000 new refugees arrived and resettled in Ohio between 2003 and 2011. And the countries of origin are listed here, so you can see how diverse those countries are and the areas that the immigrants are coming from in this area: Somalia, Burma, Vietnam, Russia, Uzbekistan, Cuba, which is my home country, and several others that I can't pronounce right now. And in addition to the primary resettlement of refugees in Ohio, there have been a large secondary migration to Ohio from other states, which is also important to know. So this isn't, for all of the immigrants, this isn't necessarily the first place they come. There's also resettlements from other states around the country. And in the Columbus metropolitan area alone, this is something you may be familiar with, but maybe not, between 25,000 and 40,000 Somali refugees have recently arrived. So that's a significant population, which is why Somali is the third largest language group after English and Spanish in the state. But it's not just an immigrant phenomena, right? So Ohio dual language learners are also being raised and coming from families that have been in the United States for many, many years, but speak languages other than English at home. For example, Ohio schools enroll students of Puerto Rican, Mexican, other Latino backgrounds for whom Spanish is the home language. If we also think of the migrant population, more than 11, so close to 1,200 migrant children were enrolled in Ohio's elementary and secondary schools during the 2010-2011 school year. And many children from the Amish communities, as I mentioned, in northeastern Ohio learned Pennsylvania Dutch as their first language. And some numbers to just situate that, approximately 1,200 Amish dual language learner students are in Ohio schools, particularly in Holmes and Wayne counties during the 2010-2011 year. So this gives you an idea of the K through 12 enrollment. We have much better numbers for the K through 12 enrollment, but obviously these children are coming from somewhere else before they enroll in kindergarten. So this notion of the increase in the population is maybe captured somewhat by this graphic, but what's important to know is that although it seems like it's a small chunk of the population, the dual language learner and in the state of Ohio, once they enter kindergarten, the label changes and matches the federal label, which is English language learner. The enrollment has increased by over 15%, whereas the enrollment of children who are non-dual language learners, so the English monolingual speaking children, has decreased by 5%. So we see the English-speaking population decreasing and the dual language learner population increasing, which is an interesting trend. And then finally, as we get closer to home, the Franklin County profile of dual language learners. The population under age 6 most recently was counted as almost 100,000, so 99,000, and approximately 10% of those are limited English proficient, again using that narrower definition of what meets the federal requirements for limited English proficiency. But what this figure tells us, and it's really important to see, is that there's a much higher concentration in this local area of dual language learners in Central Ohio than there is statewide. It was a 2% versus a 10%. So that gives you a little bit of context of the population we're going to be focusing on over the next couple of days, and certainly this afternoon with the panel. I now am going to shift gears and introduce our moderator for the afternoon. I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Ann Fisher, whose name I'm sure you're well familiar with. She is the host and executive producer of All Sides with Ann Fisher at WOSU Radio. I get to say that. That's really fun. And just a little bit about her. So she's covered politics and public affairs and culture and media and business over the course of her career. And she joined the Columbus Dispatch in 1997 and covered the Appalachia region of the state for a year before joining the newspaper's editorial board. And she returned to news in 1999 as state editor. In 2005, she became the Dispatch Metro columnist, and we get to listen to her every morning on NPR. So, Miss Ann Fisher, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. I have one burning question on those languages after English, the number 10 one, it said TWI? Twee. Okay, all right. Thank you. I couldn't go on for one more minute. I want to introduce, I want to tell you that I'm here to learn as well as everybody else. That'll probably come through in some of my questions. But afterward, we'll work on this for about 30, 35 minutes, maybe 40, and then we'll go to a Q&A with the audience. So I'm really looking forward to hear what you have to say. I hope you'll, be thinking about that as well. I want to introduce our panelists now. Janine Boyd, yeah, she's not here yet. But I want to introduce her anyway. She's a state representative from Ohio House District 9, and she will, we hope, be joining us very, very soon. Also with us, to my immediate right, is Dr. Liz Pena. She's professor at the University of Texas at Austin Moody College of Communications. Welcome. I want to say welcome to the show. Okay. And so if I have any slip-ups like that, forgive me. Catherine Myers, she's the principal at the Columbus Spanish Immersion Academy and director of world languages for Columbus City Schools. She's fresh out of the kindergarten classroom, from what I heard a little bit earlier, so that's nice. She's the real deal. And also, immediately to her right, Dr. Abdinur Mohammed. He's education consultant at the Lau Resource Center in the Ohio Department of Education, right? Okay, and then finally, of course, is Andrew Ginther. He's president of the Columbus City Council. Welcome. I guess with all these statistics and all of this stuff coming up in the next 15 to 20 years, what I wanted to know, and the first question that occurred to me when I was looking over all the material a month ago when we met, I think, or longer, was, is this an opportunity or is it an obstacle? So I can't help but think in those kinds of terms, and I wondered, Elizabeth Pena, if you could kind of kick it off. I mean, is this something good or not?
That's a really interesting question. And I think historically we've thought about bilingualism as being a bad thing that we wanted to get rid of. And I think there's more and more research that shows that bilingualism, not only is it not bad for you, but it's actually good for you. And so there was a recent report that just came out that shows that if you speak another language, you're more likely to get a job and make more money. And so at the end of bilingualism, when we're dealing with little kids who start out learning English as a second language, and if they can maintain their language, we can have these really nice outcomes for them. Right. I work with kids with language impairments, and a question often comes up about that as well. And again, bilingualism isn't bad even for kids with language impairments.
Right, there's a lot about just the brain development, right?
Exactly. And so being able to deal with two languages and being able to switch back and forth between them and utilize those languages exercises your brain in a way and gives you insights and opportunities, I think. It's not easy, and there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of things I think we still don't know. But I think that the bottom line shows that bilingualism is not bad, and it actually can be an advantage.
Katie Myers, I think you're in the business of bilingualism. This is a good thing. But bottom line good thing, is it good for us to have this challenge ahead of us? The challenge of the multilingualism, all the 100 different languages being spoken.
Well, sure. I mean,
it's often posed in negative terms or something that we are going to have to overcome and claw our way through. And I'm wondering, is this opportunity to do something amazing?
I think if anybody questioned whether it is a good or bad thing, I think they would need to come to my school. They need to be around children that are bilingual or multilingual with more than two languages, and see how they interact through the course of the day or through learning a particular content, and switch, those code switches between the languages if they're trying to communicate one way and they are a little stuck with this one, but then can finish off the understanding with the other language, and show you that they do know whatever the skill or content is that they're trying to communicate to you. I don't know how anybody could be around children that are doing those kinds of things and think it's a bad thing, unless maybe there's something wrong with those people. I don't know.
Dr. Abdiner
Maybe
Mohammed,
don't tape that.
at the Ohio Department of Education level, where you're at, is it seen as something to get through?
Well, speaking for myself, I think it's a great idea to have opportunities for children to learn more than one language. I'm a product of bilingual education myself, a native of Somalia. My native language is Somali. But when I started school in the elementary program, it was Arabic as the language of instruction for elementary schools. And then I came to middle school, and the language of instruction changed into English. So I had to quickly change, the language of instruction there. We had English, Arabic, Somali, and Italian in Somalia at the time. So you could graduate from high school in any of those programs, and that creates a multilingual environment where people speak of different language. So the issue there was when you come to government with all these products of different language, how do you manage them in a workforce? But the opportunity was there and great. But for Ohio, I think there are some challenges in being able to provide a quality, effective bilingual education program. There's cost associated to it. Definitely there is a need for professional development for staff. A lot of people think that if you are a speaker of a native language and a speaker of English, you can be a bilingual teacher. And that's
not just
the
anybody
case.
can be a teacher anyway.
That's right. So at the Department of Education, we look into bilingual education programs of having people who are licensed in both the language that they are teaching in the classroom, and that kids are able to speak and produce work in both contexts. So that has to be in the program to be able to become effective. And I think that it would require a lot of thinking and a lot of resources for us to be able to do, at least in the K-12 arena. But I think the DLL program in the early childhood is a way to go.
Yeah, Millie mentioned that Central Ohio is home to the fastest growing population that we're talking about right now. Andy Ginther, no pressure, right? Opportunity, obstacle?
Huge opportunity, and I think if you take a look at great international cities, and maybe the one closest to us that embraced both the spirit of what we're discussing today, not just from being a welcoming city, but viewing it with enough foresight to understand the economic development opportunities, is probably Toronto. When you look at what Toronto did in the 90s, they aggressively went out and recruited the best and the brightest from around the world and embraced them with open arms, and the return on that investment and that strategy has been significant for Toronto. And I think we're doing that as well. And you're even seeing cities that are coming back from much more dramatic hits through the Great Recession and otherwise, Detroit and other cities that are taking this approach. So I see huge opportunities. One of the reasons Columbus continues to grow so significantly when many other major cities around the country are declining in population is due to new Americans that are coming. In some cases, first generation, second and third generation. We were with folks from the Nepali community earlier this year, and in many cases, they've already lived in 2 other places in the United States. They chose Columbus because of how welcoming, open and smart, we like to say. But they were in places in Texas and in Georgia and Tennessee, and they did not feel the same way about those communities the way they do here in Columbus. And it's one of our fastest growing groups.
I can't remember if it was Tanny or Millie that said something about one of the problems with the counts is that people don't necessarily want to report that, don't want
Yeah.
people to know. And Elizabeth, you're nodding your head. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a big problem. We can't get there if we don't know what we're dealing with in terms of resources and that sort of thing. Yeah.
We see it in research, for example. So we'll ask families, what language do they speak at home? And it isn't until you get to the point where they trust you, where they know you, and they realize that they can answer. It's not an honesty thing. It's really more of they're frightened. They don't know what's going to happen. as a result of them knowing another language at home.
They're
or
really getting
using
mixed
that.
messages.
Yeah.
I mean, out there, right?
Exactly, exactly. And sometimes they're told, your child to be successful needs to only speak English, and so you need to switch over to using only English at home. And then it might cause the child not to be able to communicate very well with their family because the family may not be fluent enough in English, or the English input that they're able to provide isn't of high quality, even if they can provide a real high quality input in the child's first language. And so we need to also be thinking about quality of access and what kids are hearing. But yeah, families really are at first reluctant. I think if they know you, you can get at some of that information, but it's hard to get to.
In Spanish immersion or any foreign language immersion, is that a two-way street, or is it always English speakers learning Spanish, and that's who you want in those kind of schools? Katie?
Um, well, no. I mean, in particular for our school, it's changed over the years. In the inception, it was very much that way. It was all English-speaking students who were immersed in the Spanish language and learning a second language. But now, it's very different. We have 43% Latino population in our building. And so in the last 2 years, we've had to look at our immersion model, because now a monolingual immersion model doesn't work for the 43% of our population that are Latino children and they're speaking Spanish in the home. So you have to change.
That's echoing that larger number in your school, right? In your
Yes.
school, yeah.
Well, our families want that.
Yeah.
They want to come to our school. They are comfortable. They can communicate with their students' teachers. They can communicate with their principal. They feel a sense of trust. They feel a sense that if they need something, that there is a sense that they can. I guess it's just the trust piece, that they can go there and get the support that they will need without a sense of fear. And so we do. It's increasing. And if you go back and you look at the data over the last, since the inception of the school, it has increased over time at least anywhere from 2 to 3% since the inception of the school to get to where we are now. And it continues to do that. And it's a lottery system, so a lot of Latino families are putting their names in for it to still, because it's not like you pick, it's just, that's how it goes. And it's still increasing by that percentage, even though it's a flat-out lottery.
We were talking earlier, someone mentioned that in many countries around the world, multilingualism is a norm. It's not the exception like it is in the United States. And I wonder, Dr. Abdin or Mohammed, do you see that happening down the line here, where we can catch up? Because it sounds like something you want.
Absolutely. I think there is a history of misunderstanding about bilingual education in this country, and that a bilingual workforce is what America needs to compete in the future. And I think there is a growing tendency by many states, including Delaware, where they are saying that schools have to provide supports for students to graduate with bilingual proficiencies, so that they are important to the marketplace. So there's a growing trend now in schools providing what's called bilingual seal of literacy, to show that a high school graduate is not only academically proficient, but also linguistically proficient to be able to work in multiple environments. But let me come back to Columbus Public Schools.
Sure.
Since we're talking about this issue here in Columbus. Columbus has the largest ELL population, or English language learners, in Ohio. And the Welcome Center that the Columbus Public Schools started, we're talking about fear of the unknown. But the welcome centers and elementary schools in Ohio are the first gates where these parents and children come. And what we communicate to these schools is to welcome these parents and children in a language and manner understandable to them. It's always challenging to be able to speak or to provide translations in 110 languages. But at least Ohio school teachers do that. And we get phone calls from a remote school where the first ELL child walks in and the teacher says, hey, I have a kid coming next week from China. What should I do? Can you send me some materials, literature? What can I make him welcome? So already Ohio is doing that. I think the issue here is how do you establish programs that, these students, when they graduate from high school, not only are they learning English and academics, but also maintain the heritage language. I have a kindergartner. My own child is in kindergarten. And he spoke Somali with his grandmother until this year. So last year he went to pre-K, and now he's in kindergarten. He's losing Somali and gaining English because language taught in the classroom, language that is enforced with curriculum, language that has reading materials that are supported, takes over from language spoken at home. So he's now less likely to talk proficiently with his grandmother and wants to talk with his parents in English. So we're seeing that trend in our own child, that as he gains one, he's losing the other one. And you ask about my middle school kids, then they don't speak a word of Somali. They are more proficient in English and less proficient in Somali. And that's happening across all immigrant populations in Columbus, where it is an inverse relationship between language gain in English and language loss. So how do you maintain a heritage language for those kids when they graduate from high school or college so that they can be bilingual, in the workforce? That requires a lot of thinking and a lot of support.
Mm-hmm. Andy Ginther, the city already funds about 500 preschool slots for low-income families. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but is the funding for those slots on par with what's going to be needed in the realm of dual language learners in the future?
Not at all. We've got a long way to go. And just hearing some of the stories and points here, I'll share probably one of the most sobering exchanges this year with some Latino parents that we were meeting with. Along these same lines, that they had spoken Spanish in the home, their children had learned both English and Spanish, but based on some of their interactions with school officials, not Spanish immersion school, but within the Columbus City School District, their child, once the school representatives knew that they spoke Spanish, automatically started labeling and already started putting in a particular approach to things. And so here was this mother who desperately wanted to protect and continue to promote their cultural heritage in speaking Spanish, instructing her child no longer to speak Spanish outside of home, and was wondering whether or not they were going to continue to speak it in their household because of the concerns and labels that come along with ESL and other alternative educational supports that some folks still in the system misunderstand or don't quite grasp. So I think that Columbus has a long way to go, both within Columbus City Schools, but also we need to remind ourselves that the 6 of the 10 largest school districts in the state of Ohio are all in Franklin County, and over half the children that live in the city of Columbus are actually assigned to suburban school districts. Mm-hmm. So if you take a look at the diversity that has transformed Hilliard City Schools and Southwestern City Schools and Worthington City Schools, we've got a lot of work to do.
Right. So what are the building blocks here? How do we even start to address this issue? I mean, maybe we are, but it's so very incremental at this point. Elizabeth Pena?
That's a really tough one.
I mean, is it teaching people how to educate this kind of population at the preschool level first? Does that have to be our first?
I think we need to have, first of all, an awareness at a lot of levels of what it takes to, say, maintain bilingualism. And I think that we need to be able to value that second or that home language. I think one of the things that we do really well in U.S. schools is we eradicate kids' first language, we replace it with English, and then when they're in high school, we want them to learn to become fluent in another language. It's kind of bizarre. And so I think that we need to be able to find a mechanism for supporting that dual language learning throughout. I also have a child, but he's in high school, and he doesn't speak any Spanish. He spoke Spanish till he was 5. And my husband doesn't speak Spanish, so that makes it harder to maintain. But I keep hoping that, he could get back to it. It's hard, though. I'll speak to him in Spanish. He has good comprehension of Spanish, and, I'm hoping to send him off, I don't know, somewhere where he can have more of an immersion experience to maintain that. But it isn't easy, I don't think, to maintain the 2 languages in the context of all the messages that you get about whether the home language should be used or not. And even if you know that it's okay to use the home language, there's situations where, the kids want to speak English, or, they don't have enough models of the home language to be able to maintain it. So it's a complex, I think it's a complex issue, but I think we need to be able to support dual language learning at every level, from preschool, and continue that through, instead of having these big breaks, I think, in supporting their home language use.
Well, welcome, Janine Boyd. Glad you could join us. Really appreciate it. No, it's, I'm glad, but state funding for preschool has been cut in half during the past decade. Is there sufficient support at the state level for the necessary investment at the local level, or is this seen as a local issue only? Something that, Andy Ginther has to worry about as president of Columbus City Council.
So thank you all. Thank you for having me, and I apologize for being late. I came from Cleveland, and there was lots of construction and different weather elements on my way down. It was like driving through 3 states. So I apologize, but thank you for your patience. To answer your question, we should do better about funding from the state level, but we have not.
Well, how's it viewed? I mean, how is this issue viewed? Because we talked earlier before you arrived about how really most of this is occurring in central Ohio.
I don't know how candid I'm permitted to be.
Be candid.
Okay, so there's a lot of lip service paid. I mean, that's generally what happens sometimes. You've got your choir. I'm one of them. I'm a speech pathologist by trade. I was a child advocate and coordinator for children with special needs and mental health disorders for Head Start, and an advocate for Head Start for years. So, you've got your choir, and also I'm bilingual also, and so you have your choir, but you have a lot of people that need education still about the importance, the significant impact that quality early care and education play in a child's development, whole development. And even in a family's development and connectivity to learning. So we need more of our legislature educated about what happens when you don't invest early on. You pay more long term, right? You pay more at the other end of life if you're not investing early.
As far as the conversations that are going on at the State House level go, another thing, concept I brought up at the beginning was, is this an obstacle or an opportunity? I mean, is this seen as a problem or an opportunity to really do something different with early childhood education in the state of Ohio? I wonder how they're talking about it.
So if I'm being, again, candid, we got a lot of talk going on about education. If you're talking, we got to talk about charter schools, right? We're talking about funding, who should be managing a district, a school district, for instance. So we have a lot of talk going on, and early childhood education, early care and education often gets thrown in, but it doesn't get to take the lead with all these other sort of, really, I don't know how else to say it. They're these very excitable topics that also warrant our attention, you know, and our legislative attempts and work and arguments and discussions. But in this last budget, I can be honest and tell you it didn't have a lead because there were, you know, these other things in the lead.
So, state funding for preschool has been cut in half during the past decade. You know, the city of Columbus is funding about 500 preschool slots right now for low-income families. Andy Ginther. But how else does the city join the conversation besides funding?
Well, certainly making sure that we have high-quality standards in place and making sure that we're partnering even with providers and centers that aren't meeting our necessarily standards for receiving funding currently, but if we can increase their capacity and the quality of care and instruction that they're offering to their preschoolers, that's a critical part of ours. Ours is not just necessarily adding as many spots as possible. First of all, we can't afford it overnight. We have to build a plan and put together the collective will in this community to fund preschool for every 4-year-old in the city of Columbus. But it's also about raising the quality of instruction and experience that 4-year-olds are currently having in their centers and schools or home-based providers. So it really is about being strategic, thoughtful, raising the quality of care that currently exists and build capacity amongst those providers, but also to add additional funding for spots to 4-year-olds who currently don't have access to high-quality preschool.
So how are they talking about it in the Department of Education then? I mean, are you a one-man department, or can you tell us what's going on there and how well they're funding?
Who are from the Department of Education? If you can stand up, please. Donna and
Please do.
yeah, and
Thanks.
yeah.
Thank you.
So I think the department sees the importance of early childhood education, and I think I was a member of the Columbus Education Commission, where we've talked a lot about the needs of raising awareness for early childhood education. I think one of the areas that my office is interested in is how do we transition early childhood programs into the K1, 2, and 3 elementary schools, so that the rules that you establish in early childhood education, if you provide, for example, dual language education programs in a pre-K setting, then how does that continue in the K setting and the first grade setting and the second grade setting, so that at least you have a trajectory of continuation in the education of these kids? One of the challenge that we have, or at least that we're dealing with, is that K-12 education for English language learners is English language acquisition. The focus for helping English language learners is to make progress in learning English and to attain English proficiency. So we have to find a way that, I mean, schools have the flexibility to do it in a bilingual program, but we don't measure what they're learning in the bilingual context. What we're measuring is the English language acquisition. So students have to meet the state requirements for and federal requirements for being proficient in English. So if bilingual education is the context we're talking about, the question is, how do you talk about in the early childhood program and then continue to transition to the K1, 2, 3 at least, so that public schools are doing exactly what we're trying to advocate for pre-childhood education?
Is, when you talk about K1, 2, 3, is the idea there that if they could make it through the third grade with bilingualism or whatever it is, that then they can probably manage to keep it?
And there's enough research to back it, but at least you would need to continue, as long as you live, because proficiency in English or native language at the 4th grade level or 3rd grade level is not sufficient for you to succeed in the middle school and high school. So you have to continue learning this language as you grow.
Right.
So we have to think in a methodical way to say, how can pre-K education mirrors the education of kids in K through 12? What we have now is that many English language learners do not maintain their heritage language, but once they get to the Ohio State University, they begin to learn the native language. OSU offers Somali, Arabic, all the heritage language at the college level. And why we didn't do that in high school, in middle school, and elementary school is that an issue that we have to think about.
Right. And they have people, they have clubs, they have people that's cool to get back together and get back with it. You know, the changing demographic in our schools changes how we attract new and qualified teachers, right? And you mentioned that this demographic change is occurring in the Spanish immersion school in Columbus as well. How are you attracting new teachers? What are you shooting for there?
Well, so particularly as we move to a dual language model, you know, we have to start thinking about the professional development and the particular training that our staff needs. And
How does it change?
well, it changes because now they have to look at developing the literacy of children in both languages. They can't do what you're talking about with only developing the literacy in English. They have got to develop that literacy base for our kids in both their home language. And for us, our English language learner population is all Latino, where in other schools in Columbus City, they're going to have multiple children with multiple home languages. For us, we only have, you know, when you look at the English language learner population, they're all Spanish-speaking children. So, but our teachers have to learn how to develop that literacy in both of those languages and not, for us particularly in the early ages, they've only been developing literacy in Spanish. We have not been developing literacy in English. Starting in kindergarten through into the second grade, our students don't learn, they don't even have English language arts until they're in second grade. So when you look at a child that's coming from a background where they're only speaking Spanish in the home and they have no, you know, other English components, and then they have to take a third grade reading guarantee test, I mean, it's hard for that student. So for us now, we need my teachers need a bilingual endorsement. So that's what they need. They need the training on how to then develop that literacy piece and understand what it means to be bilingual. And I'll be honest, every single, well, not every single one, about 90% of my staff members are all bilingual. And they still don't get it, even with their own learning, even though they've done it, and they've been bilingual learners their whole life. Going into the classroom and teaching children, because nobody taught them in a way that built the literacy for them in both of those, or intentionally did a transfer of knowledge from one language to the next, you know, and worked with that intentionality piece. So my staff has to have that training to do that.
Abdul?
I just wanted to comment on teacher trainings in Ohio. There are about 16 to 18 Ohio colleges and universities that train teachers with a TESOL endorsement, teachers of English to speakers of other languages. And these teachers are highly qualified to teach English language acquisition for ELLs. But there's only one university in Ohio that has a bilingual teaching endorsement program, and that's the University of Findlay, at least to my knowledge, until last year. So there's a need for
Very much so.
the Ohio colleges to be able to provide teachers to be able to get those endorsements and licenses to be able to have effective bilingual programs in Ohio. Otherwise, one of the challenges is that you open a program and say it's bilingual, but you're hiring people who speak the language but do not have the license to be able to teach effectively to those students. So that's an area that needs to be highlighted, and Ohio is challenged a lot with those challenges at the higher education level.
Well, we've reached the 40-minute mark, which is where I wanted to stop and get audience participation. I'd love to get the questions from the audience. The microphone's right up here. I think it's switched to on. If it's not, it's in English. It's just switch it on. And please join the conversation. Love to hear from you. So, if you're familiar with my show, you know I can go on and on and on. This is, you know, I'm not done yet. So just step up to the mic if you have a question, and then great, thank you. And why don't you tell us who you are? And is it on?
Is it on?
Yep.
Oh, I'm Jacqueline. I work at the Crane Center as a senior researcher. My question is, I think you've been starting to speak to this about some of the challenges with dual language learners, but I think that many educators would say that they're seeing, or even that limited English proficiency definition was pretty negative. So what can we do to make sure that these students are prepared to excel in English, that they can pass these state exams, even in preschool? What can we be doing to make sure that these students, especially as maybe new immigrants or new students in Columbus, that they are prepared?
So that's a great question, and I'm going to wear my former hat and give some suggestion. So when I was at Head Start, one of the things I implemented was something called Language Classroom. Part of my study as a speech pathologist was really researching and trying to address the over-identification of children of different language backgrounds as having a speech and language disorder. So one of the things I implemented was Language Classroom. It was a small classroom of children of different language backgrounds, so a portion of whom didn't pass their speech screening and did have different language backgrounds, along with peers who were native English speakers, and of course had no problem passing their speech screenings. And there was a speech pathologist and a teacher in one. And you don't necessarily need a speech pathologist, but because that person conducted the screenings, for me, that's why I had her in there at that time, it was a she. So, you know, in a lot of, involving peer modeling, you know, doing speech and language exercises, you know, sentence structure, sort of storytelling, and activities like that, that you know, we use all the time in an early childhood classroom setting. But really making it a peer-to-peer experience so that the child with a different language background would, you know, have this model that's relevant, and they would learn from each other. So that's one idea I would offer educators when it comes to proficiency, you know, opening doors to proficiency in the standard English.
Any other thoughts?
I think, Janine, thanks for mentioning the under-representation or the over-representation in special education for ELLs, but they are also underrepresented in gifted. So that's the other part, that ELLs find themselves that you don't find them in gifted programs. The Ohio Department of Education, the Office of the Lau Resource Center, collaborating with the Early Childhood Program, created a guide that is posted on ODE for all early childhood programs to ensure that English language learners or dual language learners are identified at the time of enrollment. And we have in that guidance what's called a home language survey. I think we don't identify kids because of the way they look or where they're coming from. We identify them based on set of questions that ask, what is the first language that this kid spoke when they started to speak? What language do you spoke often at home? Is there someone at home that speaks a language other than English? So if one of those questions is yes, it doesn't mean that the student is an English language learner. It triggers an assessment, a screening assessment, to ensure that the student is proficient in reading, writing, listening, and speaking at the grade level that they are in. And that screener tells whether the student is an English language learner or not. So we are encouraging, this process is required for K through 12 programs. We encourage, you know, early childhood programs outside of schools to also do the same thing, so that these students, if they're identified in the pre-K, then they don't have to go through this process when they come to kindergarten. So if we have a set of procedures that we do at the kindergarten level, I think we should also do the same thing in the pre-K. The challenge for pre-K programs is that there is very limited number of TESOL endorsed or bilingual endorsed teachers available in those programs. Whereas in K through 12, you'll find those abundant in Columbus, Southwestern, all these districts in this area that they are working with these students.
Why the disparity? I mean, why a shortage and then an abundance? Is it pay? I mean, why is that? Is there no incentives? I don't know. Does anybody know?
I would say that we didn't realize how important early care and education was until recently. And we're just, like I said, even at the legislature, there's still a lot of education that's needed for legislators who are not exposed. They don't know the kind of opportunity you miss when you're not providing, early childhood education when a child isn't. So I think some of it is priority, and we're just shifting, and it's obviously a slow shift because the funding has even been cut.
Do we know of the kids who failed the third grade reading guarantee test or the third grade reading assessment? Do we know what percentage of those were English language learners? I mean, do we even know that?
We have an exemption in place.
Okay.
For those that have been in the U.S. schools for less than 3 years or have not been provided instructional supports for the last 3 years, then they cannot be retained.
Okay.
So, but we know that if they're not getting enough supports, then they would be subject to retention. That has been the history of ELLs in this country, where they are either placed lower than their grade because they were not proficient in English, therefore they could not show command in the academics. But we have an exemption in place, thanks to the Ohio legislature. We've advocated, or at least the Ohio TESOL group has advocated for the 3-year exemption, and that helps Ohio schools work with these students before the retention policy becomes effective. If a child comes into Ohio school in kindergarten and they have been provided supports, K1 and 2, and they do not pass the third grade reading guarantee, then they can be retained.
Okay. More questions from the audience? Sure. Laura? Nope. Come on up to the mic. Tell us who you are.
Thank you, Sean Carter with Future Ready Columbus. My question is about awareness and engagement. And so I wrote it down because it's kind of tricky for me. Because we know that raising the awareness around early education, pre-K education is something that has been a struggle in urban communities. And I suspect, and I don't know this, it might be also the same way for dual language learners and their families as well. As Dr. Muhammad had stated, from birth to 5, that's really their time. They learn their naturalized language, and the grandparent is usually the person who spends the most time with them. And it's an opportunity to embrace your personal culture and embrace that language, because you lose them to the school and the culture, the dominant culture, once they reach kindergarten. So how do we go about raising the awareness and the overall importance of pre-K from a fundamental standpoint as it relates to our dual language learners and new Americans in Central Ohio?
You mean raise it among the new Americans?
Yes.
That are with them in that first critical 5 years.
The first critical 5 years, how do we just raise the awareness of just pre-K?
Yeah.
In respect to dual?
That's an interesting. I know you, Elizabeth. I think I made up a person's name in here, but I think it was you. You're working on developing a culturally informed intervention for Latina mothers. No, I made the whole thing up. Okay, so I read too much. I over-prepared again. But who would like to take that on? I think that's a really great question. Elizabeth?
I mean, I can give it a go. I mean, I do think that we need to be able to embrace families and work with families to provide those kinds of supports. And, I was thinking also about the previous question as well, that we need, families can provide a lot of support in the content of what children need to learn, and they can do that in the home language. And I think that sometimes families have this belief that they can't be the ones to teach them something because they're going to learn that in school. They're going to mix them up by teaching them in their home language when they're learning it in English. And I think that if they, one way that they can help support learning in general is to provide a really rich linguistic environment in their home language on topics that are related to school. And I think that we need to be able to partner with families to be able to do that.
Andy Ginder.
Can I brag about one of our early start providers?
Please do.
Just in this question and Sean's point, and I think follows along with our discussion here. So Creative Child Care North, private child care center on the north side of Columbus, they'd recently seen a real influx, and I spoke a little bit earlier about the Nepali community and how it has grown exponentially in the last 5 or 10 years in the city, predominantly around the old Northland Mall site. So the center director there saw this huge influx and need, but a real divide around culture and language. And so the center director, with help from our team and community leaders, decided to hire 2 aides to help kind of bridge that divide. And so they've been teaching and speaking in both Nepali and English, communicating both with parents and with the students about the importance of preschool and kindergarten readiness. So I think that's a great real-world example that's happening right here in our city. Creative Child Care North and the center director there made it happen.
We had another question. Come on. Yep.
Hello, I'm Eric Kurlock with Action for Children, and want to thank Laura and Tanny for focusing us on this important issue. So often when you hear about ethnic groups and new immigrants and the thought is about 2030s and decades out. And in early childhood education, the future is now. And we've already had, since 2011, in the population of 3-year-olds, a majority-minority, odd phrase, of population. So congrats. My question is, I actually have a comment and a question. The comment is to your question about the supply of the workforce. Yeah. And there is a huge factor involved in salary. If you look to the starting salary of a Columbus City Schools teacher, it's more than double the starting salary of many of our early childhood teachers, especially in community-based settings.
Yeah. I thought that was an important issue.
Absolutely. and we shouldn't be afraid to talk about it. It's a really crucial issue to address, too. So my question, though, is around parents. Parent preference, especially for the earliest years, maybe before the pre-K year, is really important. Whether the child has an out-of-home experience, whether they're placed, what that level of quality and the type of that setting is very important. And parent preference very much affects that. With many of our new immigrant populations, with other ethnic groups in other places, I'm most familiar, bizarrely, with Southern California, for a very small amount of my work time I spent there. There's a preference for less institutional settings and more informal, more family-like settings. And I wonder if you might talk a little about that and how one negotiates family preference, how we keep the focus on quality and respect for what family preferences are.
You mean there's a preference to keep kids out of preschool?
Not out of preschool, but when they're in or out-of-home settings, the preference is for a family child care home, or someone who looks and speaks, et cetera, like the family of origin and so forth. So.
Who'd like to take a swipe?
So in Cuyahoga County, we have a star rating system, and family child care providers, family home child care providers qualify. There's criteria that's been established by our Office of Invest in Children, and that criteria applies. And of course, a great deal of study has taken place, I think, about family child care providers and how to help them reach certain criteria, so they are providing a quality experience for children that are in their care. So there's a star rating system, and it's for, you know, both your actual, what would I call them, your non-family child care providers, and then your actual family child care providers, and everyone strives. There's incentive involved, absolutely. There's you know, both materials, equipment, you know, if you're serving children with any sort of neuromuscular or sensory neural involvement, you might need equipment, and curriculum aid and all sorts of things that are there for incentive. So that's one way that, you know, you can kind of start the process of ensuring that your family home care providers are providing a quality service, involving them, connecting them to the system. You know, don't leave them out.
I think when we talk about family support and awareness of early childhood programs, one area that I think that we need to find a way to advocate for is putting value on maintenance of heritage language in the home. That parents are encouraged to learn English, and kids are going to schools learning English. And kids are becoming more proficient in English than the parents. So the question is, why do you need the native language? What's the value of maintaining that? Because nobody wants it. At least in the minds of the parents, you are valued more of learning the new language. That if you don't speak the language and you go to the mayor's office and you don't have a translator, then nobody understands you. Or if you go to the school and you can't talk to the teacher, then... So the point that I'm trying to raise is, how can we find a way to highlight the importance of heritage language to the families and to the young kids, to say that it's not a negative to maintain and learn your language.
It's not an either-or proposition.
Exactly.
Or it doesn't have to
exactly.
be. Okay.
But kids are learning that their parents speak the old language, and that they are the ones now who are speaking on behalf of their parents.
Well, how did you do it growing up? I mean, you said you Somali in the home, then Arabic in school, and then was it Italian? I can't remember, but I mean, how did you manage?
Well, if it's a
Do you
dominant,
still speak
if the
Somali?
language is the dominant language, then you don't have a problem. It only becomes a problem when it's a minority language.
Right.
So
Okay.
a student who's learning Spanish and is a native English speaker doesn't have an issue to function within the native language, because that is the language that is.
Right.
But when it becomes a minority language, that is when it loses the value.
And you were educated in Arabic, but the majority language still was Somali outside. Okay, gotcha. I wasn't sure if you moved to another country or something like that. Okay. Anybody else? Elizabeth Pena?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I think we don't do very well is invite families to participate in schools. And so sometimes if they're a little bit different, I had the pleasure one year of spending a lot of time with somebody who does work looking at culture and cultural differences, and then I moved back to Austin, and my son was in first or second grade, and I remember walking my son to class, and there were a bunch of families in the lunchroom having breakfast, and so it'd be the kid who was having breakfast, and the mom, and the cousin, and the baby, and all these people, and standing in line having breakfast. Well, about a week later, I get this letter that everybody got in the Wednesday folder that said, families will no longer be allowed to stand in line with their child when they're having breakfast. The child must make their own decision about what they're going to eat. So what does this tell a family who doesn't speak English? And this came out in Spanish and English, don't worry. But what does this tell a family who doesn't speak English about whether they're welcome in their child's school?
Well, what does it tell anybody?
Exactly. I mean, you
About whether they're
say,
welcome in
oh,
their
we want
school.
families to come and participate, blah, 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 blah. Oh, these families don't participate. Well, you just chased them away. And so I think that I'm not sure that we always do a very good job, you know, as institutions with inviting families.
It
and
always
really
seems like a
including them.
special event when I've covered things like that where they're trying to get families more involved in the schools. It's a special event instead of sort of integrated organically into how we live our lives and how we proceed. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think we're just about out of time for final remarks now, and okay. Oh, you have a question. Okay. Dr. Laura Justice. Okay.
So maybe this is the last question, and it's a loaded one. So, oftentimes, by the way, Liz, you're from Austin. In Columbus, we're credited with being one of the most socioeconomically segregated cities in the United States, and Austin beats us. You're number one, we're number two. And in our country, socioeconomic status is correlated with bilingualism. So I would hasten to guess that the majority of bilingual families in our country tend to be lower socioeconomic status. And one of the things we do is we tend to segregate kids in schools as well as communities. So we have we have a lot of kids who are bilingual in Columbus, but they're all in one classroom. And I'm kind of going to hit you up as a starting point, which is when we look at early education and we look at how we segregate kids, what can a policymaker do? What's a specific thing that policy could do to try to desegregate so that all kids can benefit from exposure to kids who are bilingual?
Was that you, Andy Ginther? Okay. Okay. He's thinking. Well, Catherine, you want to?
I really think that policymakers, I think I think the people that are in the places that that have the power and that can make the decisions need to support the programming that my staff is trying to do right now. I think that's where it begins. And I think it begins small and it begins grassroots, and then from there it begins to change, and then you begin to have bilingual schools that aren't just Spanish and English, but that you may have some that are Spanish and Somali, or it could be a multitude of things. But I feel like the programming and the things that we are trying to do at our school could just solve a multitude of these issues, given the supports that we needed to be able to do that, and given the opportunities to start the pre-K programming that we're asking for next year. Yes, and also with the French immersion. Columbus City also has a French immersion program that's in the same boat that my school's in. And parents in our community love our immersion programs. We could have immersion schools all over Columbus City, and I'm telling you, the families would be going crazy over those lotteries to get their children in those schools.
I've never understood why we wait till high school anyways. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
They would be
but
doing it.
But they keep doing it over
right.
and over. I mean,
but the parents in Columbus want great education, and they want new things for their children, and they want something that's better and different that they didn't have an opportunity for. And so in our building, we have children that come to us bilingual, but we have also children that don't come to us bilingual that are leaving bilingual. So we're growing. We're just beginning to use the word bilingual and get really happy with that. Outside my office, it's be calm and be bilingual, and so you have to get familiar with the vocabulary and tell kids, it's cool, oh my gosh, you can speak 2 languages, and a lot of our parents, and I'll tell you, 43% are Hispanic, but gosh, 46% are African American. And those families that send their kids to our school are seeing an opportunity for their children to be able to use language to further and better the opportunities for their lives. That's why they put their kids in the lottery for that school. So, okay, that's what I think you.
Yeah. I think, okay, one more question.
I asked Laura. So I'm Monique Mills, and I'm an assistant professor over in the speech and hearing department, trained as a speech language pathologist. Thank you, Ann Fisher, for moderating such a great panel. I wanted to piggyback on what Catherine just stated. My interest in this topic is all around teaching. I teach a multicultural class, and so I'm teaching our students here about bilingual education. Sorry, Millie, I'm sure I'm doing it all wrong. But one of the things I learned from the research that I've done for my coursework is about which bilingual programs work best. And so it looks like the two-way immersion programs work the best. And Millie, you've worked at one Barbary Elementary School where kids are learning all of the content in both languages throughout the school. So maybe in first grade they learn math in Spanish, and then second grade they learn it in English. And so but the least effective in terms of reading proficiency in English, so the two-way immersion program is purportedly the best. The least effective is the English as a second language pull-out or content model. So that seems to be the most common way that we address ELLs or DLLs in the United States. And so it seems to me that there are official achievement gaps as a result of not educating people in the way that we know is best effective for English outcomes in reading. So I guess my question is, I agree with everybody here that bilingualism is an advantage. I believe it's an opportunity, but this seems to be a real obstacle in terms of the education model that we've chosen in the United States as opposed to other places where there is a positive correlation between bilingualism and socioeconomic status.
I think that's and I guess I can start to answer Laura's question with the follow-up from yours. I mean, in just this experience here today, I mean, words matter, and whether or not we're talking about English as a second language versus bilingualism, or English language learners, quite honestly, versus dual language learners. Are these children and families that need extra special services? Are they a drain on the system? Are they an exciting part of our community that are going to provide greater economic opportunity for people living in neighborhoods throughout the city? Columbus is still evolving, and we are not, by any stretch of the imagination, an international city by standards around the world, but we're showing some great signs of promise. And I think one of the ways a policymaker can help further the agenda is having folks realize that the disproportionate amount of small business owners and entrepreneurs in this community weren't born here, and English was not their first language. And so understanding that spirit and everything that dual language learners can contribute now to our system and the education of their colleagues and classmates in the classroom, but also what they can provide this community over the long haul. That is what I believe that policymakers is creating the appropriate culture and trying to change systems, at least the directions of those systems, to better understand the great opportunity involved.
Okay, and then, so now I'm going to talk to you strategy-wise, like an advocate, which is really the best way to approach policy. So, is from an advocate's perspective, not a legislator.
That's true.
So I'm going to give you a real example first, and then talk shop. So Denise Treehouse, State Representative Denise Treehouse out of Cincinnati, had a bill this budget. It was House Bill 460, I think, and it was the Community Learning Centers bill. Okay, so this is an example, real life example. She found a school, or they found her, in a Cincinnati area that created what they call a community learning center, and in that school they had everything that it became a one-stop shop because they had, you know, originally, so the poverty in Cincinnati is deep. It's a combo, right? It's urban, it's rural, it's all together. And so addressing the needs of those children and families to make sure that they be as successful as possible was challenging, you know, because you needed to have a diverse approach. So they created this community learning center, and in that place they had public-private partnerships that allow for things like dental, vision, hearing, all those exams, right, to take place at the school, mental health. So you are able to address the whole developing child, right? So this, without asking for any money from the state, she worked with the school to make it a model, a center of excellence, for instance, right? Another term for it. And to create a bill that just simply, a bipartisan bill, there were like 57 of us that signed it. It's like unheard of. You know, 57 of us from both sides of the aisle signed on to this because it was an excellent model, right? A model that the state could duplicate in different, you know, districts, regions. Everybody could learn from it. Everybody could take the model and kind of make it fit where they exist, right? So you could do the same thing when you're talking about desegregating, you know, your bilinguals or other language children, citizens. You can do the same when you talk about parent involvement and engagement, family involvement and engagement. You can do the same when you talk about immersion. You can do that, and I'd be happy to carry that bill for you.
Okay, great wrap up. Okay.
Thank you, Anne. You're a great moderator. Thank you. So, and thank you to our panelists. Really, what a wonderful blend of people who advocate and care for our young children. And so thank you for coming here, even all the way from Cleveland. Thank you, yes. Thank you for your introductory remarks, both Millie and Tanny, really informative. And I just noticed that my dean, Cheryl, snuck in. I didn't see you sneak in. Can I ask you to just come up here and speak for a few minutes? I want everybody to hear from you. And when she is finished, let me ask you all to stay and have a reception with us. So this is my dean, Cheryl Ochterberg.
Hello and welcome. I'm delighted to be here. Laura was filling in, thanking everybody, because that's really what I'm here to do today, is thank everybody. Thank our guests, all of you, for coming today and giving up what must be one of the most glorious days outside to be with us inside. So I want to give you special thanks for that. I want to thank all of you, too, as professionals and educators and advocacy champions here on this topic. It's very special to my heart. I wish you were here and working, doing your good work when I was a child. I was one of those that grew up in one household, was passed to another household, and then yet another household, and they were different languages. And each household tried to beat out of me the language that I came in with. So I'm one of those individuals that for some number of years went silent. I didn't have language. I just went silent. And I was a very late learner to read. So I didn't learn to read until I was in 4th grade. I think mainly because I was confused, and I didn't have a center. I didn't have a language center. I couldn't find myself. And I can recall pretty clearly what it was like as a child, what it felt like. And I literally remember finding myself in the 6th grade, that it wasn't until I was in the 6th grade that I actually felt like, yes, I can learn. And I remember that in 6th grade, I think that was my most successful year my entire life in terms of learning. The feeling of it, though, just the feeling of it, the feeling that I could master whatever came to me, that I knew I could learn. And that's what we want to give all of our children, regardless of where they come from, right? But that dual language learning, we know when they become adults, positions them to do more and do better than anybody with a single language. Not only socially, not only looking at it from a global perspective, but now we know that in terms of brain science too. Their brains, in effect, are bigger and better than everybody with a single language. So what better gift could we give our lower income, higher risk children than dual language learning? But having said all of that, again, I want to thank our panelists, Dr. Muhammad, Catherine Myers, Liz Pena. I want to thank Tanny for being here, and certainly Andrew Ginther for giving us all of your generous time. Thank you. And Janine Boyd, negotiating all the traffic. Thank you. What we hope this event really will be and do, though, is the beginning of a stronger collaboration, working together in terms of our academic groups, our business groups, our policy groups, our advocacy groups, because it's only when we knit all of this together, make that strong fabric, then there won't be holes that children fall through. Then we'll really have something that we can support our children with. I want to draw your attention to, I believe everybody has one of these wonderful white papers in your folder. This is one in a series, but it's a special edition to help support the meeting today. But I urge you to look at it. It should reinforce all of the content you heard today. We welcome your comments and suggestions. We want to do a program like this every single year. We can do better and do more with your input, so we genuinely do want to hear your ideas and suggestions. I also want to underscore that there's another event tomorrow on the same topic, a larger event in the Fawcett Center, and we invite you to attend that as well. And I hope you do linger today, enjoy the reception, and enjoy talking with each other. Thanks again so much.